I'd like to take this time to welcome and introduce someone who I'm very excited to have with us today. This person is actually instrumental, has been instrumental in the conceptualization of this event. But even beyond that event, she brought awareness with her to our organization that has opened up conversations, has shifted mindsets, and has really furthered a commitment and action around equity. And this is what equity leaders do. I'm talking about Dr. Monique Chism, our Vice President for Policy, Practice, and Systems Change at American Institutes for Research. In her role, Dr. Chism leads the 6 federally funded comprehensive centers that we offer. With more than 22 years of experience in education, Dr. Chism is a renowned expert in educational equity, state systems of support, supporting effective teachers and leaders, creating safe and healthy schools, and turning around low-performing schools and districts. Most recently, she served as Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education for the U.S. Department of Education. In this role, she was advisor to the Secretary and Assistant Secretary of Education on pre-K through 12 education policy, and oversaw the direction of 8 program offices and led key aspects of implementation of the Every Student Succeeds Act. Prior to joining ED, she was the Assistant Superintendent for Innovation and Improvement at the Illinois State Board of Education. Dr. Chism earned her BA from Ohio University, Master of Arts from Central Michigan University in Interpersonal and Public Communication, and her PhD in American Studies from Michigan State University. Please welcome with me Dr. Monique Chism.
I'm so happy to be with you. I first want to start off by saying a special thanks to Beth Howard-Brown, Dr. Beth Howard-Brown, and Dr. Causey for their efforts in helping to plan this event, and also the planning committee. And so if we could just take a minute to give them a warm thank you. I also want to say a special thanks to each and every one of you, my colleagues, in the fight for equity and excellence in education. It's not easy, I know, to take time away from the office, and it's not an easy fight, and I call it a fight, to focus on equity and education. And so I want to thank each of you for being here, for being committed, and for taking the time to invest in thinking about how we advance together. I wanted to take us back to thinking about the structure of what frames our education work. And some might say that it's policies and laws. Others might argue that there are different levers, but I'm going to focus on the law. When we think about the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and we actually think about President Johnson when he signed it, he said that he felt it was the most important piece of civil rights legislation that he would ever sign. And I think that what we have seen over the years, through different reauthorizations, through different amendments to the law, is this focus on trying to get this theory of equity right. It's been a hypothesis around how do we really effectuate change to make sure that we have an equitable education system in our nation. And essentially that's what policies are, right? They're hypotheses, that we're where we are testing and trying out a theory, hopefully based on evidence, that we think will lead to change to help to support the goals that we have in place. It's a great challenge to focus on equity in systems that perpetually create inequality. And I would argue that systems are meant to be intractable, right? Systems are hard to move because they are built to last. And so when we're talking about systemic change, there's a lot of different levers and effort that we have to pull. Sometimes I ask myself, though, if this is a theory about change, why do we as educators act as if we don't know what it takes to help kids succeed in school? I think that I would offer that there's a question around our capacity gap. Is the capacity gap a knowledge gap or a will gap? And that's what I'd like for us to focus on for today. I think that we have the knowledge. We know what it takes to help kids succeed in high-quality education environments. It's about the will. It's about fighting for equitable funding. It's about fighting for high-quality teachers in every classroom. It's about making sure the resources are there. It's making sure that when you go into meetings, that you're having the critical conversations, not the tangential conversations that aren't going to move the needle. Brene Brown, who I absolutely love, many of you might know, offered that you can choose courage or you can choose comfort, but you cannot have both. You can choose courage or you can have comfort, but you cannot choose both. I find myself sitting in many meetings where I have these internal dialogues with myself. Some would call it a little schizophrenia. I just call it, pumping myself up for the hard conversation, where I say, am I going to say the thing in the room that needs to be said, or am I going to stay comfortable and secure my standing in this organization? And for those of you who know me, 9 times out of 10, I say the thing that is uncomfortable, but it's leading happily to some changes. I want to talk a little bit about AIR, not because we have it right and because we've done everything perfect, but I think that our team, and I'm not going to take any credit for this, our team is an exemplar of being in the fight for diversity, inclusion, and equity. Recently, AIR was recognized by the Diversity MBA as one of the 50 out front organizations that places women and minorities and diverse managers in positions of leadership. And I can say with great confidence that our CEO, every time he has an opportunity, takes the time to talk about the importance of diversity and inclusion. He highlights, this is David Meyer, he highlights where we are not meeting the standard or not meeting the bar, but also talks about how it's each and every person's responsibility to focus on diversity and inclusion. Again, I say this not because I want to say that we have it all figured out. I think if you talk to many of our employees, they can point to things that we could do right away that could help to improve the environment. But I say it because I think we're committed to the fight. We have modified our company policies to focus on onboarding and communications so that every employee understands that the company's commitment to diversity and inclusion the first day that they arrive. We have established a diversity and inclusion council that works to bring problems of practice to bear for real-time deliberation and communication. We have worked to measure our progress against benchmarks, national benchmarks, international benchmarks, for how to support diversity and inclusion and a focus on equity. In fact, our Chief Diversity Officer was here, Dr. Karen Francis, and she has helped our organization develop standards that help us think about equity, culturally responsive practices, and inclusion in the work that we do every day. I want to shift just a little bit to the work that we do in our technical assistance space, the work that we do to support our states through our comprehensive centers and through other technical assistance efforts. We have really tried to focus our team on helping to build and increase capacity for focusing on equity and excellence. So this past May, we had an opportunity as a group to go through what I would call a transformative experience. The Pacific Education Group came in and led a seminar for us. It was called Beyond Diversity. I had actually gone through this 10 years ago, and I felt like it was transformative then. And then going through this again this past May, I also found it to be life-changing. And our goal for that session was not to kind of develop new tools or new resources or new things that we could take out to our states. Our goal was to focus on ourselves, to really identify where we enter the conversation, where some of our bias might exist, where our blind spots are, and where we need to do better in terms of being a good support partner for our states and for the districts and schools that we work with. It was a difficult process. Many of the people who are in the room today went through that process together. And it's hard to do that as a group of colleagues and be that vulnerable and that open and that honest. But I think that as a team, it has moved us forward in really important ways. We have, through our work and the state planning that we do, we have applied what we are calling an equity lens. So we don't have this perfect yet, so we're piloting it. But we are trying to use different protocols. Many of you are familiar with tuning protocols that you do for lesson plans. But we're trying to take that concept, that idea of a tuning protocol, and apply that with an equity lens to the work that we do through our TA. So that when we are interacting with our states and asking what are the most important things that you're working on, how can we support you, we're going to come back with an equity lens and say, how is this focusing on your opportunity gaps? How is this going to close the achievement gaps? How is this going to help you reach your goals around equity and access? We are also then continuing to do things like this seminar. And this was one of the things that I think I mentioned to Beth in one of our early conversations. I said, I'd love to have an equity conference, and lo and behold, she made it happen. So thank you, Beth. It was just a little conversation, and she took and ran with it, and I'm so appreciative of it. But I want to say that we're here to help you. It's a difficult fight. It's a hard fight, and we don't come in to say, like, we know how to do it better than you, we know how to do it this way or that way. We come in and say, we know this is a difficult fight, we have resources to bear, and we're here to help you. Part of those resources we're going to send to you after the convening. We have a website that is dedicated to ESSA implementation, and we have a page that's specifically devoted to equity and how to think about ESSA implementation as it relates to equity and access. We also have some resources that we'll leave on the table, our ESSA co-pilot, that help to think about this also. But I'm going to go back to Brene Brown as I close, because I know that I'm already over my 5 minutes that I had. But I want to go back to Brene Brown. You guys might have heard of a book that she has. It's called Daring Greatly. And in that book, she references back to a quote from Teddy Roosevelt in 1910. And he said, "It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short time and again and again. Because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasm, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows that in the end, triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly." And that's what I say to all of us. Let's fail while daring greatly. Is this a conversation about knowledge or will? Let's focus the conversation on will and help to make systemic changes to improve outcomes for students. I thank you for being here today, and we're willing to stand with you in this fight. Thank you.
My name is Robyn Madison-Harris. I work for the Southeast Comprehensive Center at AIR. And I want to share with you today about an experience, a wonderful experience that we were afforded earlier this week. The Southeast Comprehensive Center at AIR sponsored a civil rights learning journey experience for a group of 10 of our clients and staff. So if you went on that journey, please stand, wave your hand. The National After School Association was also a co-sponsor that brought along some of its staff. And the endeavor was organized by Sarah McCann of the Institute for Educational Leadership and Tyson Elbert of Advocacy Bill. So Tyson's with us. Please stand, raise your hand. So over the course of 4 days, 27 of us from throughout the nation traveled to Jackson, Philadelphia, and Meridian, Mississippi, and Selma, Montgomery, and Birmingham, Alabama. Throughout the journey, we focused on stories of Medgar Evers and his family, the work and premature deaths of civil rights activists James Chaney, Michael Schwerner, and Andrew Goodman, the Selma to Montgomery March, the Montgomery bus boycott, the bombing of 16th Street Baptist Church, the Birmingham Children's Campaign. We visited the home of Medgar Evers, the place where he was shot in the back by a white supremacist sniper. We went to Mount Zion Church in Philadelphia, which was burned to the ground by Klan members. We visited the gravesite of James Chaney that was reinforced by metal brackets as a result of frequent vandalism. Together we marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma. We visited Dr. Martin Luther King's Dexter Avenue Church and Parsonage's home in Montgomery. We walked in the rebuilt stairwell of the 16th Street Baptist Church, where at least 15 sticks of dynamite once took the lives of 4 little girls with all the potential in the world. Their names were Addie Mae Collins, Carol Denise McNair, Cynthia Wesley, Carol Rosamond Robertson. We visited historically significant sites and perhaps more importantly, listened to and had conversations with people who lived these experiences firsthand. These individuals, members of an unsung greatest generation, own the narratives in ways that history books cannot. We also sought to link this to contemporary issues facing America, like mass incarceration, systemic failures of education systems, issues concerning justice, equity, and fairness. In doing so, we visited the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Equal Justice Initiative's Legacy Museum and National Memorial for Peace and Justice, sometimes called the Lynching Memorial. One person here with us today served as the heart and soul of this journey. At this point, I'd like to introduce to you this morning our speaker, Roscoe Jones, Sr. Mr. Jones is a native of Meridian, Mississippi. He is a veteran civil rights activist and the founder of Freedom 64. As a 16, 17, and 18-year-old African-American student in the segregated, separate but equal Jim Crow South in the early 1960s, Mr. Jones attended the Freedom School in Meridian, Mississippi, where he was a student leader, served as the president of the youth chapter of the NAACP, served as co-chair of the statewide Freedom Summer Youth Convention, and was a student leader in the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. During Freedom Summer, Mr. Jones worked closely on voter registration with slain activists Michael Schwerner, James Chaney, and Andrew Goodman. Some of you might know this as the Mississippi burning case, about which a movie was made. What most don't know is that Roscoe was supposed to be the 4th person in the car with Chaney, Goodman, and Schwerner on that fateful night. But at the last minute, he agreed to speak to a youth group and stay back home, ultimately saving his life. A year later, Mr. Jones was in Selma, Alabama for Bloody Sunday. He returned to Selma to make the historic march, one of only 300 from Selma to Montgomery, where he watched Dr. Martin Luther King give his historic "How Long, Not Long" speech outside of the Alabama State Capitol. After a failed attempt to integrate Meridian High School, Mr. Jones was one of 7 African American students to integrate Meridian Community College, the only male alongside 6 brave women. Later, he served in the Marine Corps and in Vietnam, where he was the only African American in his company. There, he has served as a human relations officer assigned to address racial problems among American troops that were occurring during wartime. Today, we have the absolute pleasure of hearing from him in the flesh. He will share with us about from where we came, how we're here, and where we're going. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Roscoe Jones, Sr.
I am Roscoe Jones. I was born and raised in Mississippi. And one thing in life I learned is be careful what you ask for. When the Little Rock 9 were integrating Little Rock School, my grandmother and I was raised by my grandmother, I'm a grandmother boy, but my grandmother and I was watching television. A tradition we had in our family, watch the evening news. And I remember sitting on the porch with my grandmother in the swing, and I asked my grandmother this question. I said, Mom, why did they not want those kids in that school? What's in there that they want to keep them out? And I don't remember what she said, but I do remember telling her this. I said, Mom, when that comes here, I want to be a part of it. Well, in 1962, Mega Evers came to Meridian, Mississippi to organize the youth chapter of the NAACP. My grandmother gave me $2 and said, go join the NAACP Youth Council. So be careful what you ask for. So that was my beginning of being involved. Some people call me a leader. I call myself a foot soldier. I am a foot soldier. I also watched what went on in 1963 in Birmingham. I remembered my hero, my mentor, Mr. Evers, being assassinated. I remember the assassination of the President of the United States. And I said to myself, when this comes to Mississippi, I'm going to be a part of it. In 1964, Mickey Swanner and his wife, Rita, arrived in Meridian, Mississippi, working for a group called COFO, the Council of Federated Organizations. It only existed in the state of Mississippi. In the state of Mississippi is where you only found 4 civil rights groups working under one umbrella. Did it work good all the time? No. The bad boys, who I call SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, they were the bad boys. SECC were the preachers, the praying preachers. NAACP was the legal arm, and CORE, my definition, and I'm giving you my definition, were the group that didn't know where they belonged. Well, we had CORE in our area. Mickey Swanner came in under CORE and took over the area of Meridian. The state of Mississippi was divided up into 5 congressional districts at that time. And each organization had a district. So we were in the 5th at the time. And we had CORE. Make a long story short, I got to know Mickey and his wife Rita. James Chaney came back home from Canton, Mississippi, and started working with Mickey, and I got a chance to know him. Andy Goodman, and I'm talking about the 3 civil rights workers, I did not know. You know, to know someone, to be around them. I was introduced to him. There are very few people in the state of Mississippi, other than Mickey Swanner and James Chaney, that knew Andy Goodman, because they rode in the car from Ohio to Mississippi with him. Andy Goodman was only in the state of Mississippi for less than 30 hours, and he was dead. I was introduced to him. I did not know him. I remember his smile on his face, and I remember James telling me, Roscoe, you got to go to Philadelphia with us. Well, the next morning they went to Philadelphia. I had told James that night that I would go with him, and Mickey, who is Michael Swan, I was calling Mickey, what we call him. Mickey called my home. He and my grandmother talked, and my grandmother said, Mickey, want to talk to you. So I got the phone and I talked to Mickey. At that precise moment, there was a knock on my grandmother's door. It was a gentleman who had asked me to come speak to the youth group at his church on that first day of summer, 1964. And I told Mickey that I had forgotten that I had promised him, and Mickey said, "You're going to the church. You're not going to Philadelphia with us. Your role is to work with young people. So you go to the church. We'll see you back that afternoon." Well, that afternoon led up to 44 days later when they did find the bodies in an earthen dam. Shortly after that, we had a conference in Mississippi of the Freedom School Convention. I don't know how many of you all have heard of the Freedom Schools or know anything about the Freedom Schools, but we had Freedom Schools. Meridian was the largest Freedom School in the state of Mississippi. We had a school. We had an old Baptist seminary. And we had something like 400 kids attending our Freedom School. That's unusual for a summertime activity, but we had 400. At any rate, we were the mecca of the Freedom Schools in Mississippi. So we decided that we would have a convention in Meridian. There were 41 Freedom Schools in the state of Mississippi. We housed them all. The young people in Meridian, Mississippi was a planning group. We planned for the housing, the transportation, and everything else for the convention that was to be held in Meridian. I don't know how many of y'all have seen the movie Mississippi Burning. I don't like it. It took a true story, made fiction out of it. But that's the way we do things in this world. At any rate, in the ending of the movie, there's a scene where the two FBI agents are talking about a march. I led that march from the Freedom School Convention to First Union Baptist Church, where the memorial service for James Chaney was being held. They had just buried James that day. And the ironic part about that is he couldn't even be buried in his hometown. His grave is outside of Meridian. It has been vandalized. The reinforcement that you see behind the tombstone was done by my classmates. And I love them for it. I really do. I love them because I thought they had forgotten about us. But a group of them got together and got tired of hearing about it and went out there and reinforced that tombstone so it wouldn't be turned over anymore. The picture that was on that tombstone is no longer there. An everlasting flame that was supposed to have been there is no longer there. But James Chaney and his mother and some other relatives are buried there, and thank God for the church, because they were the only one that afforded Miss Chaney an opportunity to have her son buried in a cemetery. For 2 years, nobody knew where James Chaney's body was. We did not know. I was very active in the civil rights movement. I did not know for about 2 years where they had buried. None of us went to the funeral. We had the memorial service. Dick Gregory gave up his career as a comedian in Meridian, Mississippi. When the 3 civil rights workers were missing, Dick Gregory was there. And he gave up his career as an up-and-coming comedian and got involved right in Meridian, Mississippi. To fast forward, I know I don't have much time. That was my involvement in civil rights. After the summer of '64, when I went back to school, after the convention, we had decided at the convention that we were going to integrate schools in the state of Mississippi. And our reason for that, these are teenagers now, okay? And by the way, let me say this. The foot soldiers were the difference makers in the state of Mississippi, okay? I would like all of you to go to the Civil Rights Museum of Roscoe Jones. You will not go there. The reason I won't go is because they're not honoring the foot soldiers, the young people. I don't care about me. It ain't about me. But George Brown, who was our chairman from Macomb, Mississippi, and other people from the Delta that I got to know, the young people who actually did the things that needed to be done. I want them honored because today young people need to be able to look back and say, hey, we have role models. I was able to do it when I looked at Birmingham. I got my inspiration from Birmingham, watching poor college put those dogs and hoses on those young people. Those were young people. Those were not adults. They were teenagers. They were the difference makers. And I hear people today say, well, young people, you don't get involved. No, they don't get involved because when we left the civil rights movement, after I left the Selma, I forgot all about the movement. I'll be honest with you. I'm partially responsible for it. I talked to a young lady right there in the hallway yesterday from Meridian, Mississippi. And she had seen a film of me. And she said, I saw you on a film about civil rights. Mr. Jones, why aren't you at our school? Why don't you tell us about this? And I said, okay, when you go back, Superintendent just left here. I said, when I get back to Meridian, I'm going to go to her and tell her that that class that you're in, I've been invited. And I will be here. These young people need to have, they have role models. They have role models from 63 in Birmingham and throughout. They had role models in 64 in Mississippi. Then they had role models in 65 in Selma. The movement was about young people. But today I want to say this. Where are our college students? Where are our leaders to bridge the gap that we had bridged when we were in the movement? You see, I was a foot soldier. The college students were our leaders, and the adult were the advisors. We don't have that today. You look at the young people from Florida. I happened to be in Washington, D.C. at the time. One of the drawbacks of that I tell people real quickly, they can march. You can march about one issue, but the politicians are very smooth. They'll let you march, and then they'll give you something. And after a while, ain't nothing going to be said about it. But if you combine all the issues together, and you bring in other people, see, if they had brought those issues of bullying, mass incarceration, drug addiction, and all of this, and came to D.C. and got together with those kids in the D.C. Baltimore School District, it would have sent a message throughout the United States. They did do it, but they didn't do it to the extent that I felt that it should have been, because it wasn't organized. It was focused on one group. If kids are going to have a movement, if there's going to be a movement of young people, it has to be a full-fledged organization set up whereby they have leadership. And that leadership needs to come from our college students who are sitting on their rear ends doing nothing because they left our public schools doing nothing, and they get to college and they want to do one thing, get out and get a job, and then do nothing. And that's because we've trained them that way. Me too. But you know what? Now I'm telling young people, what are you doing? Don't worry about what I've done. What are you going to do? What is your responsibility? And you see me with my overalls on, right? I'm still working. I wore these when I was a teenager, and I wear them now. Because this is my suit and tie. Just like the Ku Klux Klan don't wear the hoods anymore, they wear the suit and tie. This is my suit and tie. I gotta have my work clothes on. Because we still got a lot of work to do. We need to have integrity with our people. Okay? The word integrity. We've lost that somewhere. We need to be straightforward, honest with these kids, and realize that when they come to us with a question, give them an answer. If you didn't do it, don't own up to it. But own up to the fact that you didn't do it and say, wait a minute. You know, I didn't do that, but this is what I think you ought to do. We need to get our kids involved. Not thinking about ourselves. It's not about us. It's about survival for all of us. And we forget that. So, you know, my thing to people today is let's be honest and let's show them that there is integrity and let them know what the meaning of the word integrity means. What you do, what you say, stand for. Let's be courteous to people. Get involved. Be courteous of your classmates. Let's stop the gang warfare. You don't own anything. You don't even own the clothes on your back. You know, I want to talk to them one-on-one from a standpoint of a group and say to them, hey, I've been there, done that. I could have been a gang leader. And I was a gang leader in the United States Marine Corps in Vietnam. I was a gang leader. I put my skills to work to save other people. You know, I got no problem with you being in the gang, but do something positive with it. Be courteous to other people and do something for somebody else. You first of all have to change people's minds from a local standpoint as well as from a policy standpoint. They're not going to put together a policy unless their minds are on that policy and want to make changes. So you really have to go out to the mindset of people all the way around, I feel. That's what we did in the civil rights movement. When I look back and think about why we demonstrated to show that there was inadequacies going on. And we want other people to see this. We knew about it, but with the coverage and everything else that we got, Dr. King was very brilliant. And his followers, his team, they were brilliant. Because some of the strategies they came up with was fantastic. They used Bull Connor. They used him with his arrogancy. You know, and I see us today, we have to use that. You know, if we want something done, we have to look at, first of all, why we want it done and who we're going up against. It's a strategy. And then we got to convince them, okay? That's what I look at. Thank you very much. I appreciate you guys. And then I've been enjoying, okay? Thank you.